I would like to introduce to you our first speaker, who is Mr. Lauri Aasmann, my boss, Director of Cybersecurity at the Estonian Information System Authority. The Information System Authority in Estonia, or RIA as we call it, is home to our national CERT. It coordinates the safe implementation of IT infrastructures important to the state. It conducts supervision, raises awareness, and does all these day-to-day things in cybersecurity. Without further ado, Mr. Aasmann, stage is yours, please.
Well, we tend to talk about change a lot during the recent months, and with a good reason, of course, because change is in the air, and the title of today's event is related to change as well. So the title of my presentation is a bit intriguing, and with a good reason, because I do not have a definite answer whether this changes everything, hence the exclamation mark there. But I know that the year 2020 is not even halfway through yet, and the crisis is not through yet. So the year will definitely have a COVID stamp on it. Quite a strong one even, and I'm pretty sure that maybe not entirely, but the COVID will have impact on how we consider and manage cybersecurity in the world. For starters, we need to overcome the first phase, and the first phase or the obstacle is that there is a temptation to cut budgets. And that's very natural, because many budgets for governments are decreasing, people are losing income, businesses are losing revenues, etc. So cutting on security, and especially on cybersecurity, would be one of the natural steps. But let me assure you that this is not the right direction, because now more than ever, we need to make sure that our digital platforms and then the digital solutions are up and running. So instead of even thinking of cutting, we should make sure that those services have proper funding. Well, it is only logical that the increased use of digital services broadens the attack surface. And the recent months have shown us a steep increase in the need for digital services globally. There are now more users who are less experienced in using ICT infrastructure. And therefore, there are more vulnerabilities to any sort of compromise. That means that people, because of these circumstances, people have started using online banking, for example, or digital signatures. Often people who are not experienced with IT matters. And all of them become part of our supply chain in one way or another. And now imagine if somebody who's very experienced in online enterprise or businesses is trusting their data with somebody who has just recently opened an internet shop and hasn't done anything to make sure that the channels are secure, then those vulnerabilities immediately and automatically affect everyone in this formula. So we need to make sure that also those people who are only now starting to use the ICT infrastructure are kept safe, that they are trained, that they have proper knowledge of how to do it securely. And now I will talk about shifting the responsibility. Well, there is nothing more lasting than temporary solutions. That's the old proverb. But it is true that if, for example, a school teacher starts to implement Zoom for teaching classes and never introduces passwords, or for example, online shop is set up without proper security measures, then it is quite probable that those people will not patch their systems or introduce passwords also later on. So it is important to get it right with the first try and implement proper security measures. But I also believe that no matter how hard we try, we can never match the ability of the criminal world to surprise us and come up with new tricks. And we can never educate people enough to completely be able to avoid the traps that are out there. So instead of using all the resources to raise awareness, which we also have to do, but instead of putting all the eggs in that basket, we need to make sure that the environment, the cyber environment, is safer. And one way to do it is to make sure that in cooperation with private entities and government, the networks are cleaner, so that ideally the end user is not even able to open links which are malicious or documents which contain malware. So that's the way I see things should go. Now, in crisis, often the functionality overrules cyber hygiene. And it is normal for the beginning. If there is a start of crisis, we often sacrifice some of security. But it should be only temporary. And cyber hygiene should get the prominent attention as soon as possible. According to our Estonian CERT, the number of cyber incidents or the sophistication of malware has not increased during the crisis. So the probability of getting hit by malware or ransomware is as good as it was before the crisis. It is just the fact that during the crisis, it is significantly more complicated to deal with the results. So I guess what I'm saying here is that every nation knows their weak spots, and there are always sectors which are less prepared for crisis than others. Unfortunately, the medical sector tends to be one which is less prepared to tackle cyber incidents. And interestingly, this crisis has put medical sector to the spotlight. It has always been strong security forces or hard security providers like police, border guard, or defense forces who need to combat incidents or crisis. But this time it's medical sector, and I'm completely sure that there is a need to change our approach to risk. Depending on sector, and in that case, medical sector needs all the help and strengthening it can get. So more awareness raising activities, more funds to help them come up to speed. Well, if there is one thing I want to highlight from this crisis, then it is the fact that the criticality of any service depends on circumstances. And we have worked many years in Estonia to come up with perfect digital solutions. We have the digital signature, we have digital prescription for medicine, and so on. But even all things combined, we could not foresee such an impact to our society as the COVID brought to us. So it means that we need to re-evaluate the dependencies we have. And we can find dependencies in places we could not expect. So for example, the critical services alone can function, but if there are no way to get, for example, medicine or food from the shop to a doorstep of a person who needs it, then there is no use of that service. So in light of that crisis, I believe we have identified more services which should be considered critical in the future, and one of those is for example, courier services. So in a nutshell, I do not believe that we have or could or should do cybersecurity in a completely different way. So not all has changed, but some of the methods and risk surfaces have changed, and that was my point here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just ask you one more about the critical infrastructure, especially when we're talking about the traditional critical infrastructure, electricity, water, all these services that people rely on. Are there any changes you see which compared to hospitals and those, anything in the critical information infrastructure that needs to be changed? Or is this a long term, everything needs to up their security anyways? What do you think?
Well, first, I believe that it was a test of the entire critical infrastructure, regardless of whether it was information infrastructure or not. So I don't think that we need to do it completely differently. But certainly, I mentioned the medical sector and the healthcare sector. So the attacks that we have seen, not only in Estonia but also globally, are usually the result of poor cybersecurity, and that could happen anytime, whether it is a crisis situation or a normal life situation. So sooner or later, unpatched, unsecure systems will get hit, and I don't want to sound sinister, but the sooner the providers secure the systems, the better sleep we have during nights.
All right. Thank you very much, Lauri.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.